On Moonlit Wings by Mary Fan. Georgia, 1910. Clutching the rope, Anna swung her legs over her hands until she hung upside down. The yellowing canvas of the big top glowed from the early morning sun beating down outside, and the scent of animal and human bodies thickened the air. She hooked her knee onto the rope, released one hand, and reached down. "Point your toes!" Marcel's sharp voice, which carried a light French accent, called up to her. Anna tried to remember her feet as she grabbed the bottom part of the rope and wrapped it around her free leg and her waist. But, weary after 2 hours of practicing, her body dropped abruptly, and she barely managed to keep her grip. "That's enough for today." Disappointed, Anna climbed down and landed roughly in front of Marcel, billed as the Empress of the Skies. "I'll get it next time," Anna said. Marcel nodded, her thick black curls streaked intermittently with silver, bouncing by her thin, snowy white cheeks. "Your inverts are looking good. You only need a little more stamina." Wiping the sweat from her forehead, Anna smiled. Escaped tendrils from her gleaming black buns clung to her sticky neck. Though the audience seats were empty, the ring was bustling with activity. Jugglers practicing their tricks, clowns rehearsing their stunts, trapeze artists warming up their swings. Instrumental voices swirled over the noises of people chattering and grunting. Maha Lozanak, an acrobatic dancer billed as Fortuna for her abilities to dream about the future and see things others didn't, entered. Already dressed in her blue and yellow costume, she tied her signature blindfold over her eyes. "The ringmaster is on his way. You had better go get into costume." Anna started to leave, but agitation scratched at her heart. She hated that the last thing she would do on the rope that day was a failed rap. She rushed back to the apparatus. Marcel pursed her lips, exaggerating the thin lines by her mouth. "I told you, you are finished for today." "Let me do one last climb." Anna grabbed the rope. Marcel shook her head, but didn't object. Anna scissored her legs and scooped the rope over her hips. If this was to be her last climb of the day, she wasn't going to make it a boring one. After reaching above, she repeated the motion, then prepared to try turning upside down again. "Time to set up! Everybody out!" William Andley's voice boomed through the big top. Both co-owner and ringmaster of the Albers and Andley traveling circus, he commanded immediate attention. Anna scrambled down the rope. "You!" Mr. Andley, a blond man with a thick mustache dressed in a red waistcoat, glared at her. "What are you doing here? Go get dressed!" "Yes, sir." But as Anna tried to rush past him, he grabbed her arm. "I had better not catch you wasting time here again. Understand? Stay with the ethnological exposition, where you belong." Clenching her fists, Anna sped away without a word. The moment she arrived at the costume tent, Kirsten Sigrist, an animal trainer, ran up to her with Rosie, Anna's 2-year-old daughter, in her arms. Kirsten's blonde hair looked as if she'd tried to gather it into a bun, but only managed half, and her gray-green eyes were frenzied. "Thank goodness you're back! Rosie's a delight as always, but I need to get my dogs ready for the show." "Mama!" Rosie reached out with her tiny hands, which carried a cool brown tint that bore little resemblance to Anna's pale gold complexion. Anna gathered the child in her arms with a smile. Though her arms ached from practice, she never tired of holding her little girl. Yet, looking into her daughter's soft brown eyes caused sorrow to drip into her heart. Every day, Rosie looked more like her father, and every day, Anna wished he could have met his daughter. She made her way to the costume rack and grabbed her and Rosie's outfits for the ethnological exposition, more casually known as the Human Zoo. Though Anna had worn the same Chinese princess costume for the past 3 years, she'd had to modify Rosie's every few weeks. The girl sat surprisingly still as Anna dressed her. Adorable as she looked in the pink and gold outfit with its flower-covered headdress, guilt stung Anna each time she dolled up her child for circus-goers to gawk at. It wouldn't be long before Rosie was old enough to ask why she was made to spend all day in a fenced enclosure, forbidden to say a word of English, while onlookers stared and pointed. "Because some don't see us as people, Rosie." Anna dreaded the day she would have to explain that. "What's troubling you?" Charles Sasaki, already dressed in his Chinese warrior costume, approached her. Anna whirled toward him. How do you accept this? Your family came to America from Japan 50 years ago, yet you're made to masquerade as a Chinese man in his natural state. I don't understand how you're never angry. This is the best paying job I've ever had. Charles shrugged and smiled, his friendly black eyes crinkly. Cheer up, Anna. You're royalty. Anna made a face. I'd rather be seen for what I can do than what people think I look like. Tanya Mizrahi, a blue-eyed woman with short, shoulder-length hair, arched her brows at Anna. Though, like Anna, she was barely more than 5 feet tall, she seemed to take up more space with her strong presence. There was a reason why she was billed as the Amazon Queen. If you want to defy their expectations, you have to be better than they imagined the best could be, Tanya said. You must think about what you want to achieve, more than what you want to escape. I did not become the only female lion tamer in the country by moping. Why are you not in your exhibits yet? Mr. Anley stormed through the costume tent. He paused and stared at Rosie. No, this is not working anymore. He snapped his fingers. Sarah, wrap this girl in one of your shawls. She's your daughter now. What? Anna clutched Rosie to her chest as Sarah Barnes, a majestic woman with dark brown skin, already dressed in her African priestess costume, approached. Mr. Anley huffed. It was fine when the baby was swallowed and no one could see her face, but it's becoming too obvious now. I can't have customers asking why there's an African baby in the China exhibit. Because we're American! Anna's voice rose. She's my daughter! You can't hand that girl over to Sarah, or I'll sack you right now. Mr. Anley glowered. I can find another Chinese princess in a heartbeat. Sarah held out her bracelet-covered arms. It's okay, Sarah. I'll take good care of her. Blinking back tears of fury, Anna complied. She wished she could storm out and never look back, but she barely had enough money to live off of as it was. Mama? Rosie stared at Anna with round, confused eyes as Sarah took her. Hello, little one. Sarah's mouth curved. Your Aunt Sarah has a new costume for you. Won't that be fun? Anna tried to give Rosie a reassuring smile as Sarah walked off, but she couldn't help feeling as if she was losing her daughter. California, 1907. The aerialist spiraled downward and stopped inches from the ground as her skillfully wrapped rope caught her. Anna gasped and clutched John's arm, both terrified and awed. John flashed her one of his heart-melting grins. She really is a sensation, isn't she? Anna nodded. I wish I could do that. Well, why not? Let's run away with the circus. His brown eyes danced, and the spring sunlight brightening the tent warmed his brown complexion. You can dance in the chorus until you learn enough tricks to do an aerial act, and I can build sets or anything else they need. As the aerialist climbed the rope for her next trick, Anna dared to imagine herself in the woman's place. She loved to dance as a child, but her father had ordered her to stop a few years ago, since he considered it inappropriate for a young woman of marriageable age. How wonderful it must be to dance in the air! You want to, don't you? John's breath whispered across her face. In all seriousness, what's keeping us here? I have no family, and yours will never see you for who you truly are. Anna sighed. The future her father envisioned for her, full of domestic chores and obedience to a man just like him, felt like a nightmare. Now that she was almost 20, she wouldn't be able to avoid it much longer. Scarcely a day passed when he didn't bring up the topic of marriage. Yet, if he knew about the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, he would kill them both. She longed to agree to John's fantastical plan, but she shook her head. Don't be foolish. We would run out of money and starve to death. A heavy look descended on John's face. Whatever happens, know that I love you. The music swelled, but Anna didn't see what the aerialist did next, for her eyes closed and her lips found John's. Georgia, 1910. Seated in a chair carved with dragons, Anna tried to focus on her calligraphy and ignore all the eyes staring at her. She hated that the skills her mother had so painstakingly taught her to honor their ancestral traditions were now being used to entertain the ignorant. A few feet from her, Charles, her husband, swung a prop sword in graceful arcs, punctuating each move with a fierce "Ha!" No one would know that his movements were an art form he'd developed himself, and not the ancient Chinese sword-fighting techniques advertised on the posters. At least he enjoyed performing. And as much as Anna had grown to detest her ornately embroidered costume, at least she had chosen to wear it. She wasn't sure if the same could be said for the Aboriginal Australians in the enclosure to the left. Anna looked past the gawking crowd and glimpsed Rosie, now wrapped in a colorfully patterned shawl with her textured black hair teased out, playing with a cloth doll inside Sarah's enclosure. Several people leaned against the fence and pointed at the toddler. Through the mutterings of the crowd, Anna caught the word savage. Her blood boiled. I have to get us out of this exposition. She gritted her teeth. Tomorrow, I'll practice harder on the rope. California, 1907. Silvery moonlight spilled through Anna's open window and traced the perfect contours of John's regal cheekbones. Lying in his arms and surrounded by a pool of her unbound hair, heart racing and skin tingling, she finally understood what true bliss felt like. Tell me one of your stories, she whispered. What kind? Soft yet resonant, his voice felt like a gentle rain. Any kind. In the blackness of midnight, she felt rather than saw his smile. Once upon a time, there lived a fairy princess with beautiful gossamer wings. She loved to fly across all the realms, including those of mankind. One day, she met a man who had no such powers, but whose voice soothed her soul. Though they fell deeply in love, it was forbidden for her kind to be with his, and the fairy king threatened to lock her in a tower if she ever saw her lover again. Desperate, the two sought the advice of a sorceress, who told them that the only way for them to be together was if the princess cut off her own wings. Anna frowned. Where did you hear this story? I made it up. I call it On Moonlit Wings, but I haven't written it down. Why not? I can't decide how it ends. What do you think of it? It's sad, but I like it. Maybe you could sell it to the papers. A scream exploded outside Anna's door. She bolted up, recognizing her mother's frantic voice. Heavy footsteps approached. She scarcely had a chance to react before a booted foot kicked down the door. Her father stood beneath the frame, a gun in his hands. His long black queues swayed behind him like a snake. What they said was true, he growled, raising his weapon. No! Anna rushed toward her father. Chunks exploded from the wooden wall as a bullet pierced it. Anna's mother grabbed her father's arm, pleading with him to stop. He shoved her off, sending her to the ground, and took aim again. John, run! Anna tried to block her father, but he threw her aside. She fell in a heap on the floor. As John scrambled out the window, Anna grabbed her father's ankle and pulled. He tripped but didn't fall. A bullet tore the window frame. He will not get far, her father said darkly. 5 other men, her father's kin, appeared in the hallway outside. He turned to them. Let us hunt down the beast that defiled my daughter. No, please! Anna started to get up. Her father seized her wrist with a cruel scowl. You will return to China on the next ship and live with my brother's family until he can find a man willing to marry you. No one will ever speak of this shame again.